Hello everyone and welcome to this third talk by our invitee and visiting Erasmus professor of the University of Cyprus. This is Radoje Šoškić, who's visiting from the University of Priština in Kosovska Mitrovica. Radoje, who is a specialist in British drama, has already given 2 lectures, a general introduction to British drama and more focused lectures on Beckett, the theatre of the absurd, and Harold Pinter. And this evening's lecture is about the political theatre of David Hare, playwright, screenwriter as well, an adapter who is well known for his political engagement. So without further ado, I give the floor to Professor Šoškić for a talk we all look forward to.
Thank you, Lajos. I hope everyone can hear me and see me. So good evening, everyone. I'm deeply honored and privileged to be here this evening as we embark on a journey to the realm of British political theatre with a particular focus on the outstanding plays of David Hare, who is considered to be one of the most prominent political playwrights nowadays. Allow me to express my heartfelt gratitude to the professors Lajos and Aura, and to the Open University of Cyprus for extending this gracious invitation and providing me with the opportunity to engage in a dialogue about such a relevant and thought-provoking topic. So let me start. British political drama emerged in the late 1960s. I hope you can see the first slide. Amidst global and domestic turmoil, including the Vietnam War, Soviet political dynamics, and student protests in Paris. Disillusioned by Soviet interventions and the Vietnam War, leftist movements gained momentum, influencing British politics and theatre. The left-wing faction of the Labour Party opposed the Vietnam War, challenging Prime Minister Harold Wilson's perceived pro-American stance. Concurrently, Parisian protests galvanized British leftists, while dissatisfaction with Labour Party policies further fueled dissent. A group of playwrights, including David Hare, emerged to voice discontent through theatre, rejecting traditional politics. Unlike previous generations, they embraced direct action, criticizing complacency and advocating for confrontational engagement here. Legislative changes, such as the decriminalization of homosexuality and legalization of abortion in 1967, along with the abolition of the Lord Chamberlain's censorship powers in 1968, expanded artistic freedom. This allowed playwrights to address marginalized issues more openly and collaborate with small theatre companies. Amidst political and social upheavals, British political drama flourished, propelled by leftist playwrights' commitment to addressing political themes without strict guidelines. Several notable plays by prominent political dramatists emerged during this period, enriching the theatrical landscape. Representative works include David Hare's Plenty, David Edgar's The National Interest, Trevor Griffith's The Party, Howard Brenton's The Churchill Play, John McGrath's The Cheviot, The Stag and the Black Oil, Carol Churchill's Owners, and Howard Barker's Rule Britannia. These plays not only mirrored the socio-political climate, but also showcased diverse artistic expressions and perspectives. Political dramatists saw theatre as a means to catalyze, so to speak, as a means to catalyze social and political change, aligning themselves with the working class. They critiqued institutional structures, portraying politicians, policemen, and priests with a critical eye. The primary productions of British political drama were facilitated by fringe theatre companies, which did not typically attract the regular theatre-going public at the time. Consequently, these companies aimed to cultivate new audiences. Moreover, political dramatists who crafted plays for staging by fringe theatre companies believed that the significance and impact of their work could only be realized by engaging with new audiences in unconventional venues. Therefore, these companies embarked on tours across the country to reach audiences primarily from lower socio-economic backgrounds, who often lacked the time or financial means to attend mainstream theatre productions in urban centers and were underrepresented in conventional theatrical settings. Political theatre embraced Brechtian techniques and collective improvisation to address urgent social and political events, aiming to raise audience consciousness. As political drama gained acceptance, playwrights transitioned to mainstream theatres, blurring the distinction between fringe and mainstream scenes. This shift allowed for broader audience engagement and amplification of political messages across social classes, and figures like Trevor Griffiths advocated for penetrating mainstream theatres to broaden the impact of political drama, exemplifying this strategy through their careers. The influence of literary figures from Britain and Europe, particularly Bertolt Brecht, has been profound. Brecht, along with his predecessor, Erwin Piscator, who coined the term political theatre, emphasized theatre's potential to shape perceptions and foster social change. They viewed theatre as a means to cultivate critical consciousness and engage audiences with socio-political realities. Brecht's impact on British theatre began with the visit of his company, Berliner Ensemble, to London in 1956. However, Brecht was not unfamiliar to British leftist circles before World War II. His play, The Threepenny Opera, received attention as early as 1928, and he engaged with British poets such as Winston Hugh Auden and Christopher Isherwood during a visit to London during the war. British political dramatists adopted Brecht's objectives and theatrical techniques, which diverged from realism and demanded intellectual engagement from the audience. Brecht's epic theatre, opposing naturalistic conventions, influenced British political drama's departure from theatrical realism. John Osborne's play, The Entertainer, influenced by Brechtian principles, served as a model for political dramatists, incorporating elements of popular music hall and promoting intellectual engagement with the audience. In addition to external influences, British political drama was also shaped by domestic figures during the post-war period. The arrival of the Berliner Ensemble coincided with a receptive environment in Britain, leading to a theatrical revolution characterized by social, realist approaches and critique of institutions, as seen in the works of John Osborne, John Arden, Arnold Wesker, and Joanne Littlewood. According to Michael Patterson, British political dramatists of the 1970s can be categorized as either reflectionist or interventionist. And I like this division of British political playwrights into these two particular groups. And these groups were influenced respectively by Wesker and Arden. The reflectionist approach aligns with conventional realism, presenting characters as representatives of social types in recognizable situations, engaging the audience emotionally. Howard Barker, Howard Brinton, and Trevor Griffiths exemplify this tradition. In contrast, the interventionist style, exemplified by Arden, embraces a modernist mode inspired by Brecht's epic theatre. It challenges the audience's perception of reality by employing a biased, non-objective viewpoint and inviting active questioning. David Hare, John McGrath, Carol Churchill, and Edward Bond represent this strength, aiming to intervene in the audience's perception of reality, encouraging intellectual engagement and active participation. The political dramatists of the 1970s employed a variety of techniques, including epic theater, satire, social commentary, and historical metaphor, to dissect, so to say, the state of the nation during a period marked by persistent unease. Epic theater, championed by figures like John Arden, was particularly prominent, earning him the reputation of the English disciple of Brecht. Okay, just a second. Now I will move on to David Hare's political play, important political play that he wrote in the 1970s. Of course, he wrote many political plays during this period. I chose this one as the most representative one of his work in the 1970s. The play is called Fan Shan. The theatre could not remain aloof from the stresses of time, asserts Oscar G. Brockett in his History of the Theatre, emphasizing the intrinsic connection between the society's theatre and the prevailing events and changes in its social and political landscape. In 1970s Britain, this relationship was profoundly influenced by the alternating Conservative and Labour Party governments, particularly concerning policies related to the economy, Northern Ireland, women's rights, and other social issues. British political dramatists, notably David Hare, portrayed these major issues in their plays, reflecting and critiquing the tumultuous era. Hare's playwriting was shaped by the political conflicts and social developments of the decade, positioning him among his contemporaries in terms of capturing the zeitgeist, to use the German expression. Specifically, Hare addresses issues such as the economy, women's rights, and factional conflicts in plays like Fan Shan. Through the representation of a socialist revolution, Fan Shan illuminates the aspirations of the 1968 generation for political change towards socialism. Additionally, the play provides insight into Hare's early career experiences in a fringe company and his experimentation with epic theater techniques. Fan Shan is a fringe play by David Hare, and it stood out as one of the joint stock company's most significant productions, firmly establishing the company's identity as politically engaged and pioneering the workshop method ahead of performance. Adapted from William Hinton's seminal history book of the same title, Fan Shan, a documentary of revolution in a Chinese village, the inspiration for the play originated from actress Pauline Melville. Upon reading Hinton's book, Melville proposed the idea to Hare, suggesting that joint stock could craft a compelling adaptation from its contents. To echo the theme of democracy explored in the book, William Gaskell, who was the country's best Brechtian director at the time, and who also joined the joint stock company, envisioned the company's workshop as an exercise in democracy. Over 5 weeks, all the actors, directors, Stafford, Clark, and Gaskell, and the playwright himself, David Hare, collaborated through practical workshops, research, and discussions, providing Hare with the raw material for the play. Despite feeling initially uncomfortable with this approach to playwriting, Hare embraced it, and because he never aspired to be a conventional playwright and wanted to remain open to this democratic process. While the group discussions enriched the play's content, they did not offer structure or dialogue necessitating individual effort on Hare's part. Working independently for 4 months, he crafted a play entirely of his own. Subsequently, Hare consulted with Hinton, incorporating his suggestions to determine what to include and what to omit. Initially disinterested in the play, Hinton later requested certain changes. After witnessing the premiere, Hare's interactions and correspondence with Hinton added a dialectical character to the play, reflecting the perspectives of both authors in the final text. So Fanshan was obviously a result of their collaboration, a result of collaboration of multiple authors, or many authors. Before discussing the play's themes and techniques, it is crucial to explain the significance of the term Fanshan. Namely, Fanshan is a term originating from the Chinese Revolution, which Hare and Hinton elucidate in the introductory sections of their respective works. While its literal meaning denotes to turn the body or to turn over for the landless and land-poor peasants, it conveys notions of standing up, casting off landlord oppression, and acquiring land, livestock, tools, and housing. Additionally, for those who experienced the revolution in the Longbow village in China, as depicted in Hare's and Hinton's Fanshan, it symbolizes entering a new world. It symbolizes a change, obviously. Despite its original verbal form, the term is used both as a noun and a verb in the play, with consistent connotations of revolution or instigating revolution. And the revolution he's talking about here is a socialist revolution. Hare himself provides insight into why he chose to write Fanshan. He aimed, quote, to explore society and cover a period in which one felt that people's lives were being tangibly and spiritually uplifted, unquote. Moreover, feeling, quote, utterly exhausted with writing about England, unquote, he desired to create a positive work using positive material. Additionally, in the mid-1970s, Hare redirected his focus from Europe to Asia, consciously expanding his social scope. However, he didn't entirely forsake writing about the West. Rather, he intentionally depicted a favorable portrayal of a society in Fanshan, presenting it as a model for change, not only for Britain, but also for Europe. Many of the issues explored in the play concerning land politics in an agrarian society are similarly pertinent in European and British politics, including political leadership, socio-economic disparities, institutional corruption, justice, hearings on agricultural and economic matters, and inquiries prompting self-reformation. Furthermore, both in the play's text and its performance, it's notable that the characters, quote, speak and swear, not in a form of Anglo-Chinese dialect, but in short and direct English phrases, unquote, suggesting that the play is not merely a straightforward historical documentary, but rather directly engages with British society. Fanshan provides an account of the land reform achieved through the efforts of Communist Party members and the invariable contribution of the peasants in China between 1945 and 1949. It unveils numerous changes in people's lives in Longbow, primarily depicted in two distinct periods marked by different experiences of Fanshan. In the first period, the reader or the audience witnesses the primary transformations in Longbow following the overthrow of the feudal system. Subsequently, in the second period, the aftermath of the revolution unfolds, focusing on the struggle against corrupt cadres and the continued need for further reforms. So even though there was a revolution, they still had to fight against corruption. It's an ongoing process. This is what what David here aims to point out. The central argument reiterated throughout the play is that the pursuit of greater freedom and a more civilized society must persist, as corruption remains pervasive and enduring. Is anything different nowadays? This core idea is reinforced through the use of epic techniques and the cyclical nature of the play's narrative. Fanshan is often regarded as David Hare's most Brechtian play, both in terms of its technical execution and its thematic content. However, while Hare acknowledges his indebtedness to Brecht and incorporates elements of epic theatre into Fanshan, he also inserts his own political concerns, particularly those related to Britain, into the play. Despite this characterization, Hare himself disputes the label of Fanshan as purely Brechtian. In an interview with Georg Gaston, Hare refutes this claim, stating no, it isn't Brechtian. He argues that Brecht was more focused on depicting the decay of the old society rather than highlighting the beauty of the new, whereas Fanshan presents an optimistic portrayal of a newly established society. The play Fanshan is structured into two acts, with Act 1 containing 7 sections and Act 2 comprising 5 sections, each further divided into smaller parts. The division of the acts does not directly correspond to the 2 periods of Fanshan depicted in the play. Instead, the second period of Fanshan is introduced in Act 1 with the arrival of new leaders, while the interrogation of corrupt cadres is reserved for the beginning of Act 2. This deliberate structure allows for a correlation between the starting points of the two acts. Here employs Brecht's technique of historization, a key element of epic theatre throughout the play Fanshan, by framing events within a historical context, and not only historical context, but also a social and political context, and psychological context as well. Here encourages the audience to think critically and approach the narrative intellectually, further aligning with Brechtian principles. In Fanshan, the characters' social roles take precedence over their individual identities, with their names and personal traits being less significant compared to the overall state and progression of society. The play places greater emphasis on the collective experience of revolution, diminishing the focus on individual psychological development. So the individual psychological development is obviously sacrificed in the play. Here's giving priority to the social over the psychological aspect of characters aligns with a key characteristic of epic theatre, as influenced by Brecht. Many characters in the play are not deeply developed, and they often represent broader social categories rather than nuanced individuals. Here categorizes these characters in his early notes, grouping them according to their social functions, such as cadres, work team, officials, struggle group, poor peasants, and landlords, struggle objects, and so on and so forth. This classification underscores the play's focus on depicting social dynamics and roles within the context of revolution. Now, I can now turn to the 1980s, and David Hare's play, The Secret Rapture. Just a moment, yes. This is one of my favorite plays by David Hare, The Secret Rapture. So in my striving to undertake a comprehensive examination of political developments in the United Kingdom in the latter half of the 20th century, with a particular focus on the works of David Hare, it becomes sort of imperative to address the tumultuous currents that swept through British politics over the last three decades of the 20th century. And although any attempt to encapsulate the multifaceted socio-political panorama of a nation over the span of a decade or two is inherently reductive. For the purpose at hand, I shall encapsulate the concerns that have preoccupied David Hare and his contemporaries within the framework of one prominent political figure, and I have to mention Margaret Thatcher here. And Thatcher, a towering figure in British politics, held sway over the nation from 1979 to 1990, which was an unprecedented tenure for a prime minister in the 20th century. While not subscribing to feminist ideology, Thatcher's ascendancy represented a departure from the traditional archetype of an upper-class Tory, epitomizing instead the ethos of self-reliance and entrepreneurial zeal. Hailing from modest origins as the daughter of a grocer, her governance was marked by a fervent pursuit of economic revitalization characterized by the re-privatization of nationalized industries and the curtailment of state-funded social welfare programs initiated by the Labour Party. And despite achieving certain successes, her policies engendered a profound socio-economic schism, exacerbating regional disparities between the industrialized North and the affluent South of England. In the realm of international relations, Thatcher emerged as a staunch ally of Ronald Reagan, espousing imperialist postures exemplified by her decisive engagement in the Falklands War against Argentina, which was a triumph for her, which obviously bolstered her re-election bid in 1982. Additionally, her tenure witnessed the introduction of the controversial poll tax, igniting protests in Trafalgar Square, the first instance of such political unrest in Britain in over 6 decades. Thatcher's persona, both in terms of gender and character, starkly contrasted with the conventional male political establishment, rendering her susceptible to caricature as the Iron Lady or the emblematic national nanny. And Thatcher's indelible imprint on the socio-political fabric of Britain reverberated within the realm of theatre, where she emerged as a ubiquitous presence, both implicitly and explicitly. The emergence of characters bearing striking resemblance to Thatcher in various theatrical productions underscored her pervasive influence on the cultural zeitgeist of the era. For instance, the play Thatcher's Women starkly illustrates the plight of disenfranchised northern women resorting to prostitution amidst the economic turmoil of the era. The antipathy harbored by the theatrical community towards Thatcher and her policies stemmed from the deleterious impact of her austerity measures on arts funding. By curtailing subsidies provided by the Arts Council, Thatcher dealt a severe blow to the vibrant ecosystem of British theatre, jeopardizing the viability of experimental theatre groups and imperiling institutions such as the Royal Shakespeare Company and others. Indeed, remarks by acclaimed director Peter Hall underscore the existential threat posed by Thatcherite policies to the very foundations of British theatre. Do not misconstrue my assertions. Margaret Thatcher did not instigate nor embody the entirety of political theatrical production during the 1980s or 1990s. Indeed, a substantial corpus predates her ascension to power in 1979. I see her as emblematic of the socio-political conditions that engaged playwrights of ideological commitment and what they sought to illuminate. notably David Hare, whose work now commands our attention, interprets her policies as emblematic of a rapacious and culturally Philistine milieu. Hare has engaged with myriad public concerns spanning the preceding decade. In Brasnak, for example, he scrutinizes the venalities of capitalism via property speculation. Fanshan constitutes a poignant exploration of a Chinese village's endeavors to transition from entrenched traditionalism to an egalitarian communist model. Plenty grapples with the disillusionment engendered by British economic and social stagnation in the post-war era. A map of the world, another played by Hare, juxtaposes a well-intentioned leftist journalist against a cynical Indian novelist amid a discourse on global hunger. Hare also critiques the debasement of the British press, epitomized by the play Pravda, implicitly equating British newspapers with their Soviet counterparts. In terms of thematic breadth, British theatre has not witnessed such ambition since the era of Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. My admiration for David Hare burgeoned several years ago upon reading The Secret Rapture, a compelling examination of human benevolence and its limitations, which delves into the complexities of human morality and compassion, juxtaposing the selfless altruism of the protagonist with the venality and self-interest pervading the political establishment. The protagonist, Isabel, nearly saintly, assumes caretaking duties for her dissolute stepmother, a character emblematic of social neglect. Concurrently, her sister, Marion, who bears a striking resemblance to Margaret Thatcher, her boyfriend, Isabel's boyfriend, Erwin, and colleagues resent her altruism, perceiving it as a reproach exacerbated by the stepmother's demanding nature. Notably, the tale is firmly anchored in British political discourse, with the sister embodying Thatcherite ethos as a junior minister. In the ensuing years, Hare embarked on a monumental endeavor, crafting a trilogy exploring the bedrock institutions of British society. Racing Demon, for example, deals with the Church of England. It has an unusual subject, right? The Anglican Church, the Church of England. While Murmuring Judges scrutinizes the legal system, and Absence of War probes the political party apparatus. Let me now move on to the Secret Rapture. Okay. The Secret Rapture is one of the most political plays of the 1980s by David Hare.
That's okay, I think.
Everything is okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We can move on.
Okay. So, like I said, it is one of the most important political plays of the 1980s. In fact, as one critic said, it is Hare's most direct theatrical response to Thatcherism today. While the play may not explicitly focus on rendering the politics of the time, it serves as a vehicle for exploring moral concerns and arguments regarding the relationship between the individual and the political sphere, in line with the adage that the personal is the political. Here skillfully intertwines personal narratives with larger socio-political themes, demonstrating how individual experiences reflect and interact with the wider political landscape. Critics, such as Billington, have highlighted Hare's gift as a dramatist in his ability to illuminate the connections between private despair and the public realm. In its exploration of the effects of British politics on human lives, the sacred rapture delves deep into the life of its protagonist, Isabel, highlighting the collision between personal values and the socio-political landscape of Thatcherite Britain. Isabel, the protagonist, whom, when I first read the play, sympathized with from the very beginning of the play, and with whom everyone, of course, sympathized, emerges in the play as a paragon of goodness and decency in a society marked by individualism and economic turmoil. Can such a person survive in that kind of society? That was the question which I asked myself when I first read the play. Can these values survive? So the play is obviously about survival not only of the physical being, because Isabel will be killed at the end of the play by her boyfriend. It's also about survival of spiritual values. What can survive in such a world? So David Hare uses Isabel's character to embody his core values, emphasizing her capacity for guilt and responsibility amidst a morally bankrupt world. In contrast to Isabel's steadfast adherence to traditional values, other characters in the play are portrayed as corrupted by the ethos of Thatcherism. Marion, Tom, Catherine, and Erwin embody the selfishness and moral ambiguity prevalent in Thatcher's Britain, standing in stark contrast to Isabel's moral integrity. Through the interactions and conflicts between characters, Hare paints a vivid portrait of a society grappling with ideological and moral dilemmas. The clashes depicted in the play extend beyond personal relationships to encompass broader social tensions, including political and religious divides. The death of Robert, Marion and Isabel's father, at the outset of the play symbolizes the passing of values associated with the previous generation and marks the dawn of a new era. Despite being a modest, small-town bookseller, Robert eschewed materialism and religious orthodoxy, embodying a simple and principled existence. His disdain for investments and lack of religious affiliations underscored his commitment to a life free from worldly pursuits. Isabel, inheriting her father's disdain for wealth, finds contentment in her modest business ventures and shares his skepticism toward organized religion. In contrast, Marion embraces the pursuit of wealth, aligning herself with the ethos of the contemporary Conservative Party. While her religious views remain undisclosed, her marriage to the devout Tom suggests a degree of religious dedication, so to say, in her life. Politically, Robert's staunch opposition to nuclear power and armaments aligned him with Isabel's worldview, further distinguishing him from Marion's conservative leanings. These differences in values and beliefs among the siblings lay the groundwork for the conflicts that unfold throughout the play. Isabel, akin to her father, is ill-suited to the values of the contemporary age, unable to conform to social norms. Her inability to adapt to the changing times ultimately leads to her demise, mirroring the circular nature of life and death depicted in the play. Robert's presence looms large over the lives of his daughters even after his death, as evidenced by the majority of scenes taking place in his house. In death, he leaves behind a challenging legacy, particularly for Isabel and Marion, who must grapple with the responsibility of caring for their father's young wife, Catherine, who is addicted to alcohol. This responsibility serves as a test for the sisters, revealing their contrasting characters and values. Isabel, driven by loyalty to her father's memory, assumes the role of caretaker for Catherine, striving to honor Robert's wishes and provide solace in his absence. In contrast, Marian, preoccupied with her business pursuits and adherence to the profit-driven ethos of the Conservative Party, finds herself torn between her professional obligations and her moral conscience regarding Catherine's welfare. In Thatcherite Britain, characterized by values of greed, intolerance, and vanity, individuals who diverge from the prevailing ethos are often viewed as deviant. Isabel, with her principled business ideals and convictions, becomes a target within the cutthroat business world. Catherine encapsulates this sentiment when she remarks that Isabel lacks vision, echoing Robert's earlier assessment of Isabel's narrow-mindedness. Her father even said that she is a bit narrow-minded, to his view. He says this earlier in the play before he dies. This portrayal reflects the social pressure to conform to the prevailing culture of individualism and profit-driven enterprise. Isabel's relationship with Erwin in The Secret Rapture serves as another example of her embodiment of goodness, a central value consistently emphasized by David Hare throughout the play. And Nothoff suggests that love, whether expressed in secular or carnal terms, operates as a principle of goodness in the world. And Isabel epitomizes this principle through her actions. In contrast to the capitalistic hunger exhibited by other characters, Isabel's love for Erwin represents a form of political intervention. And Erwin's betrayal of Isabel, both in business and love, further exacerbates her sense of being an outcast, not only in the realm of business, but also in matters of love. This betrayal serves to deepen the isolation and disillusionment Isabel experiences, highlighting the pervasive nature of betrayal and abandonment in the social and emotional landscape depicted in the play. Erwin's act of murdering Isabel is not driven by unrequited love, as he has already demonstrated his incapacity for genuine love. Instead, he kills her, in my opinion, because she represents something he has lost, which is soul. Isabel's honesty and integrity serve as a stark contrast to Erwin's own lack of these qualities, making her presence a constant reminder of his shortcomings. Despite not loving Isabel deeply, Erwin craves her love and approval obsessively, unable to tolerate any form of loss, whether it be emotional, moral, or financial. For Erwin, killing Isabel becomes a way to eradicate these sources of loss from his life, allowing him to finally find closure. And indeed, he does find closure in a way. He does find peace, ironically, at the end of the play. After the murder scene, Hare describes the following scene as he does at the end of every scene, maintaining a consistent narrative structure throughout the play. I shall read these stage directions. There is a silence. Then the light begins to grow strongly from behind. The sound of high sun, birds singing. Strong shafts of sunlight hitting the tall windows of Robert's living room. And in front of them, all his furniture as we left it at the end of the previous act, covered in white shrouds and spaced about with packing cases. Catherine's flat moves away, and the next scene begins. After the darkness falls onto the stage with Isabel's death, the next scene begins with strong light. While Isabel's death may bring closure or resolution for other characters, the presence of light hints at the possibility of a brighter future. The restoration of her father's house to its earlier state further reinforces this theme of renewal and suggests the potential for healing and moving forward after a period of darkness and turmoil. Marion and her experiences of loss following Isabel's death marks a significant turning point for her character. For the very first time in her life, she does feel that she has lost something. So it changes her emotionally and psychologically in a way. As a successful politician, Marion may have been accustomed to prioritizing ambition and success over personal connections or emotions. However, her sister's death disrupts this pattern, exposing Marion to vulnerability and emotional turmoil that she may not have encountered before. This experience of grief and mourning prompts a spiritual renewal and a transformation in Marion's perspective, allowing her to reassess her priorities and perhaps reconsider the value of personal relationships and connections in her life. Now let me move on to the next play by David Hare that he wrote in the 1990s, which is representative of his work in the 1990s. It is called The Absence of War. David Hare's work in the 1990s, notably his play The Absence of War, marks a shift in his approach to politics amidst a post-ideological era. That's what he terms it. The 1990s in Britain were, according to Hare, and in the world, of course, not just in the UK, were times which he termed post-ideological. As traditional political ideologies blurred during this age, Hare, a leftist playwright, reflected this ambiguity in his portrayal of political parties and institutions. His exploration of themes like the pursuit of the common good within a framework influenced by rightist values captured the essence of changing times. Examining Hare's techniques and venues during this period sheds light on the challenges faced by leftist playwrights in navigating evolving political landscapes. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the emergence of the New World Order, capitalist principles dominated, even under Labour governance in Britain. Despite this, established playwrights like Hare, David Edgar, Carol Churchill, and Howard Brenton continued to produce socially and politically conscious plays, sustaining the relevance of leftist political drama. While some critics suggested that the formats of 1980s political drama had become obsolete or outdated, playwrights persisted, albeit with a shift in tone reflecting social distrust of ideologies. The 1990s, which is significant, saw a transition within the Labour Party towards New Labour, distancing itself from socialist roots. This shift blurred the lines between left and right in political plays, yet playwrights remain engaged, reflecting broader social change. So that's why he termed this era as post-ideological, because of this blurring of boundaries between leftist politicians and parties and right politicians and parties. In the realm of global affairs, playwrights like Hare delved into conflicts such as the Israeli-Palestinian issue, while others examined the implications of new borders in Europe and the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution. Emerging playwrights of the 1990s, including Sarah Kane and Mark Ravenhill, provided fresh perspectives on overlooked political issues through the so-called in-your-face theater, characterized by explicit portrayals and confrontational narratives. Despite its aesthetic focus, this movement was inherently political, critiquing contemporary urban life under the influence of global capitalism. Mainstream theaters saw significant success with political plays in the 1990s, with Hare's work staged prominently. The commitment of venues like the Royal Court Theatre to political writing ensured the continued prominence of political plays. The Actors of War is the final play of David Hare's trilogy, examining the major institutions of Britain, including religion, law, and political parties. Given his role as a political dramatist, committing to exposing the social and political issues of his time, public institutions naturally become focal points in his plays. The trilogy is notably characterized by its handling of the subject matter. These plays emerged during a time described as post-ideological, where the prevailing ideology was predominantly conservative. With no apparent alternative to the conservative rule, playwrights found themselves grappling with the challenge of addressing the corrosive effects of a conservative hegemony and the failings of British institutions within the confines of this ideological landscape. In the face of entrenched institutions and a conservative discourse that appeared as common sense, here, as a political dramatist, felt compelled to support these institutions under the condition that they underwent reform. He did not oppose them completely. He supported them on condition that they underwent reform. This reflects the irony of Thatcherism, where, as Hare notes, quote, Thatcher made conservatives of us all. We all found ourselves defending institutions which previously we would have no time for, because those institutions were better than barbarism, unquote. Consequently, Hare's focus in his trilogy was on exploring the common good, rather than promoting a specific religious or political ideology. Given the lack of alternatives to these institutions, he sought to identify and promote common social benefits within them through renewal and reform. At the inception of his research for the Athens War, before he wrote it, he did some research. David Hare undertook field work coinciding with Britain's 1992 general election period. During this time, political entities convened a multitude of assemblies encompassing election strategizing, budgetary decisions, and media engagements, among other activities. And Hare availed himself of attendance at these sessions, duly authorized by the respective political faction, and due to the fact that Labour Party opened its doors to the playwright more often than he expected. The Absence of War predominantly portrays Labour Party along with its members, and especially its leaders, but at the same time it reveals a lot related to the Conservatives at the time, the state and the media in the background. In the Absence of War, the governing party, as depicted, enjoys a considerable advantage during the preparations for the election. The Conservative Party leverages all available state resources, including vehicles, civil service personnel, infrastructure, and access to information, to bolster its electoral campaign. The same goes for Serbia and Montenegro. I don't know if the same goes for Greece or Cyprus. So politicians obviously act and think alike. The Conservative Party, like I said, leverages all available state resources to bolster its electoral campaign and result. This institutional backing imbues the Conservatives with an aura of charisma and lends credence to their pronouncements and actions. Kendrick, moreover, the public perceives the Conservatives as custodians of economic prowess, a perception perpetuated by relentless media promotion of conservative rhetoric. Kendrick strategically, the Prime Minister in the play, Charles Kendrick, strategically capitalizes on this trust by frequently invoking references to the Gulf War in his speeches, mirroring the tactics employed by Prime Minister John Major to emulate the popularity surge achieved by Margaret Thatcher during the Falklands War. Labour Party leader George Jones, who is the major protagonist in the play, who is also favored by David Hare but also criticized in the play, highlights George Jones, leader of the Labour Party in the play, highlights Kendrick's penchant for using phrases like, quote, massive troop movements. They all share the same phrases, reminiscent of John Major's discourse. During the 1990s, the media landscape was profoundly shaped by the prevailing discourse emanating from the Conservative government. In addition to his attendance at political party gatherings, Hare engaged in interviews with various politicians and journalists. Through these interactions, he discerned a dichotomous relationship between the media and the government. On one hand, the media found themselves subject to continual pressure from the government, feeling compelled to align with the governmental policies under the threat of censure. Conversely, instances of dissent were met with retribution. Illustratively, Hare recounts in Asking Around an incident involving Thames Television, wherein the company faced repercussions for its journalists' intrepid investigation into the SAS killings in Gibraltar. Consequently, Thames Television found themselves excluded from press conferences. These conferences, as depicted in Asking Around, were marked by constrained dialogue, with reporters and journalists often restricted in their ability to freely interrogate the government or its ministers, particularly the Prime Minister. At these press conferences, discussions ensued but were frequently left unresolved, as the format typically permitted only one per journalist. This limitation curtailed the potential for rigorous scrutiny of politicians' responses, fostering an environment where challenges to governmental assertions were seldom sustained. The freedom of speech is also one issue that is raised in the play. David Hare in this play criticizes the Labour Party while maintaining his leftist convictions and support for the party. Like I said, he highlights the party's isolation from external influences. He regards the Labour Party as a self-enclosed enclave, so to say, as a self-sufficient enclave, cut off from the rest of the world, cut off from the ordinary people. Here also explores constraints on freedom of speech within the party, exemplified by George's inability to address critical issues openly. Among these censored issues is the complex and contentious matter of Northern Ireland, which George's team insists must be regarded as above politics and too delicate to be publicly discussed. Similarly, George is cautioned against making political commentary on British history, despite his conviction in the truth of Britain's perceived decline. Furthermore, he is constrained from advocating for the abandonment of nuclear weapons, a stance he personally supports, but is unable to vocalize due to party directives. Criticism of the royal family and the preservation of hereditary peerages are also deemed off limits by George's party. This forced silence on critical matters concerning the state of Britain serves as a source of disillusionment for George, who finds himself unable to engage in the candid evaluation of his country's condition that he desires. And he says, quote, "We live in a country which is spavined with ancestorship. This country will never, can never prosper until it escapes from its past. He turns and addresses them all. Why can't I say that? You tell me. What is this? Is this my fault? Or is it the public's? He turns his back away from them. Why can't I speak of what I believe? Unquote. George finds himself constrained not only by the taboos set by his party, but also by the direct oppression exerted by his team members, despite outward appearances of impotence and powerlessness. George exudes an aura of impressiveness and authority, which is ironically at odds with his submissive behavior. Internally, he harbors a sense of fury and dominance, yet he suppresses these feelings to comply with the demands and repressive attitudes of those around him. George finds himself, as a result, constantly under pressure, as if constrained within a corset, so to speak, and subjected to the continual tightening of its strings by his team members. It becomes evident with the narrative that here perceives George as ill-suited for the realm of politics. Just like Isabel in the Secret Rapture is ill-suited for the world she lives in. While George may excel in realms of love, theater, or literature, the cutthroat nature of politics, particularly within the context of his circumstances, proves hostile to him. In fact, it is his kindness together with his great understanding and humanity that hinder him from being victorious in politics. The political arena in which George operates is unforgiving, favoring only the victors and disregarding those who engage in fair combat. Moreover, the political environment depicted in the play is characterized by an inherent snobbery. Even in the Labour Party, which is supposed to be the people's party, and expected to approach people equally, there are members who exhibit disdain towards their leader due to his lack of a formal degree, a manifestation of the elitism prevalent within political circles. Towards the play's conclusion, George becomes emblematic of the Labour Party and all its troubles. Instead, therefore, his downfall and subsequent remorse resonate beyond mere personal disappointment. Instead, they symbolize a significant historical juncture, and this is significant here, the demise of a viable socialist alternative. Because the Labour Party obviously distanced itself from its socialist roots. And now it began to align itself with the Conservative Party. While the absence of war carries a tragic undertone due to George's ultimate failure, it steadfastly refuses to succumb to despair, which is another important aspect of the play. Despite losing the election, George's enduring historical legacy assures the survival of the party in the long term. Much like George and numerous members of the Labour Party, here, in his capacity as a political dramatist, finds himself in failure. Failure has become an omnipresent aspect of their lives, permeating both the party and the theatrical landscape. As here himself acknowledges, both theatre and society have undergone minimal change, unfortunately. Nevertheless, like George, here doesn't succumb to despair. Instead, they find solace and resilience in the imminent beauty and challenge of their efforts, whether in the realm of art or politics. It is the very essence of their pursuits, with its formidable complexity and profound difficulty, that sustains and fortifies them against despondency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much for this really comprehensive and illuminating analysis, not only of Hare's dramaturgy, but I think of an era who described the political climate in the UK, starting in the 70s up until now. We can invite our viewers to, ask their questions or make any comments they like. You can use the chat if you like. Μπορείτε να κάνετε οποιαδήποτε ερώτηση σχετική με την διάλεξη. Ή στα ελληνικά ή στα αγγλικά. Αν επιθυμείτε στα ελληνικά, βεβαίως θα μεταφράσουμε τις ερωτήσεις σας και φυσικά μπορείτε να χρησιμοποιήσετε το chat. And while everybody is kind of reflecting on what you've talked about, I have a couple of questions for you. One has to do with Hare's evolution in the form of his writing. Having started with kind of incorporating Brechtian elements in his plays, you then describe the period in the 1980s where it seems to me that realism was more prevalent. How is that shift continued into the 1990s? Is he like, so to speak, a realistic writer, or has he been affected by modes of writing, say, in-your-face theater, less realistic per se, but incorporating other kind of elements from the movements?
Yes. Well, in the 1990s, he did some research before writing his plays. First, he would do some research and then embark on writing a play. So, the Absence of War, which he wrote in the 1990s, was the result of multiple interviews and talks he engaged in before writing the play. For example, he attended many meetings held by the members of the Labour Party. He interviewed them. The Conservative Party did not open its door to him, but the Labour Party did. So he interacted with society more like a journalist. That's why his approach in the 1990s was, so to say, journalistic.
Right.
Journalistic.
So a kind of the proto-documentary theater, as we now know it in the basically in the 21st century. Were any of these interviews reflected in the writing, like verbatim?
Verbatim.
Okay. So like some of the authentic voices were transferred into the play.
That's right. Thank you for mentioning the verbatim.
It's interesting to see how he,
evolved
and sort of adjusted to the writing landscape of his country, which used a lot of non-realistic or more documentary style modes of dramaturgy.
Like you said. Yeah, that's what characterizes his writing in the 1990s, this documentary and journalistic style. And I personally like it. I think that every great author does some research before writing.
Especially
here it goes even further. He interviews people, and like you said, he embodies this. He's the follower of this verbatim theater. He incorporates authentic voices in his plays.
And he did that already in the 1990s, which is again like a sort of precautious for verbatim theater.
Yeah.
He also does that even later. His plays of the early 21st century, The Permanent Way, which is a journalistic reaction to a major railroad accident in Britain at the time, which he attributes to rampant neoliberalism and privatization of the railways. And then in 2009, he writes, what's the name, The Power of Yes, about the financial crisis, which again incorporates personal narratives and bits from interviews and journalistic pieces. So he seems to have found his voice somehow with that type of documentary theatre.
He is no longer an imitator of Brecht,
Oh yes,
like you said.
clearly, yes.
He has finally found his own true vocation in the 1990s.
Although he did adapt Mother Courage, I think, didn't he? He adapted
he did.
yes.
Mother Courage and her children.
Is there any, would you say that he has created a legacy for 21st century UK-based political playwrights like Simon Stevens? Were they in any sense influenced by Hare?
I believe they are. They are.
Are there any questions or comments for our speaker? Anything you'd like to add?
There are 10 participants this evening, which is a success.
Well,
last night there were 5 or 6 participants, right?
No,
more than that.
No, I think it was more than that. Yes, and as I said, a lot of people will be listening to the lectures anyway, so.
Like you and Bob already said.
The recorded version.
Yes, the recorded version. A lot.
I hope they will.
Oh, we know.
Oh, they'll be there on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to listen to them yourself.
Okay, thank you.
It is great.
It's great indeed.
Just to say in closing that there's 2 more lectures. One tomorrow starting at, is it 6:30? 6:30. And on Friday it's at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
at 8 o'clock. So
Time
please,
hasn't changed. Right?
yeah. So do please join us tomorrow and Friday for the rest of this kind of exploration of British dramaturgy. The lecture tomorrow is on Carol Churchill, and the one on Friday is on Tom Stoppard, I believe.
That's right.
Okay.
So tomorrow we'll be discussing Carol Church's play Soft Cups in the context of panopticism.
Okay. And you know, Carol Churchill has been, we've taught Carol Churchill several times in this master, so I hope our students will be engaged with the
So
topic.
they're familiar with her work.
Yeah, not that particular play, but she's written so much anyway. Thanks everybody very much, and especially you.
You're welcome.
And see you all tomorrow. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.